Hey, you're listening to the Birth Junkie podcast. Get ready to dive into all things birth with me. We talk about all the hot topics from preconception to postpartum. I'm so excited for you to join me on this journey to realizing that we're all human. We all make mistakes, and it's going to be messy at times. And we're all just kind of figuring it all out as we go. Now, if you're ready to hear raw, unfiltered, and real-life stories of struggles, triumphs, and learn a thing or two from parents and birth professionals alike, then come along as we navigate this thing called parenthood together. All right. This week we have a special birth story from a doula, and her name is Bekah. And I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. So, Bekah, if you wouldn't mind kind of introducing yourself, I would love that.
Yeah, I'm Bekah Bluen. I am a birth and postpartum doula in North Louisiana. I have been attending births for a few years, but I just officially started my business within the past year. So just now getting kind of like established, but um, I love it and I'm getting like really into everything and like diving into birth work here in North Louisiana. So
Beautiful. I love it. So I don't know if you want to speak to why you became a doula or birth worker.
yeah, so I was in college for psychology, and I was in my like about to start my last semester, and I came to visit family, and I actually was contacted by a family member, and she asked me to attend her birth. And I was like, sure. I knew nothing about birth at this point, just what I'd seen on TV. So obviously, birth is scary and there's yelling and so I remember like driving to the hospital because she was being induced, scheduled induction. And I remember driving to the hospital, like pumping myself up, preparing, because I didn't know what to expect. And, I was honestly kind of nervous, but I was like, I cannot be scared for her. I have to be strong for her. And I was there for the whole thing. It was most of the day, and I, got to a pushing part, and what like was just amazed by how like amazing it was and how strong women are. And I was just like blown away that it was not scary. There was not like screaming. And I just remember just being in awe, and couldn't stop thinking about it for like the next week. And um I got married like shortly after that, and a couple months later found out I was pregnant. And I said, I want that kind of experience. Like, I don't want the TV experience where it's like scary. So I started researching and learning all the things, and I, learned about like midwifery and like home births. And I was like, oh, this sounds cool. Like, I want to have my baby in the water. Like, I've always wanted to be a mermaid. So I want to have my baby in the water. And, family was like very scared. And
Mhm.
they said, that's how you die. That's how your baby dies. Like, that's not smart. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just have like a natural birth in the hospital. And it sounds great, but there was so much more preparation that needed to happen to get to that point that I had no idea.
Mhm.
And I didn't really like understand the kind of the odds were stacked against me yet. And so I ended up, being induced, and I, had all these interventions that happened, and I didn't have a, like what people would normally think is a traumatic birth. I mean, I was healthy, my daughter was healthy, like that's what mattered, right? And so when anyone looked at it, they're like, that wasn't trauma, like that's not traumatizing, but it still was. And
Mhm.
I left there saying my experience could have been so much better. and I, learned about what a doula was, and I was like, I needed that with my daughter, and I, you know, I want to know everything I can. I'm not going to be the least educated person in the room next time. And so that's when I just really like dove into everything about birth. And I attended births for other family members and friends. And um, I wasn't really like an official doula, but I was the one everyone came to because I had done all the research and I knew all the things. So if they had a question, they came to me. I have like Instagram DMs from friends and people that I haven't talked to in years that they're like, "Hey, I know you know about this, and so can you like give me your opinion, or can you tell me what you know, or whatever?" And so I was kind of functioning as the doula for people and not even officially. And then I had my son and really felt like I really want to do birth work. Like, I love it. I'm passionate about it. It excites me. I love talking to people about it. I love when people ask me questions. Like, it's not, like annoying. And I love sharing what I know and that I like have done this research and that people trust me. And so I was like, I really want to do this, but I didn't want it to just be, a pregnancy high or a newborn high or something. So I gave it time, and then, doors started opening up. God started like really laying it on my heart. And I had looked at multiple different doula trainings, and none of them really felt like the one. And so that really like hindered me. But then the doula training that I ended up taking, it really like I was like, this is it. Like, this is what this is what I've been waiting for. And it was just, there was no question. And I signed up the last day of like it was open, and I was like, yeah, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
So and it hasn't really been a question since, and I haven't really like lost any like of that passion um since then. So
Yeah, that's amazing. And the
the
doula training program, the name was?
Birth Worker Academy, or
Mm-hmm.
the Autonomy Mommy Academy, with Kylie.
Yeah, and that's how we actually connected.
Yes, it is.
I love it. I
Yes.
mean, I love everything she puts out there. It's like based on bodily autonomy and just all the amazing things that we should already have kind of built into us, but
Yes.
unfortunately, society has taken out of us. So yeah, I love it. I love everything about that. That's amazing.
She's part of the reason that I even, was prepared for my son's birth, because I had, you know, done little like workshops she had done like during my pregnancy with him, and with the twists and turns of my son's birth, she really played like a huge role in that. So when she opened the doula training program, I was like, yes, because this is what like I needed when I was pregnant, and I want to be influenced by her because she was so instrumental for me. So,
Yeah, and I feel that way too. I wish I would have had her trainings and knowledge before I had any kids, before I even started having kids, because I feel like that's the way it should be. We should be in charge of the decisions made in our birth and not just handing it over to this doctor we've seen a handful of times for 5 minutes each time. So, yeah, I feel like she is a world changer.
yes, especially because even in those few minutes, they go to someone else directly afterwards. So even if they do get to know your heart, which with my daughter's birth, I loved my OB. I felt very supported by him, and I asked lots of questions. But in the end, he was not the OB on call at the hospital that I was at. So I don't even know if he would have followed through with anything we had talked about, but I didn't get the chance to find out. So,
Mhm.
like, you don't know if they're like hearing you, if they care about what you really want or your goals or anything, or if they even retain it because they're talking to so many other people. Like, they can't really just like look at you and your experience and then they move on to another birth, and it's kind of like they can just move on and not really care how your experience went. So,
Exactly. Unfortunately.
unfortunately.
So then obviously, with your son, you had planned a home birth, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes,
how
I
did that
did.
come about?
So, um, I really how I even ended up planning for a home birth is like the experience with my daughter, because like I said, like I thought I was like so prepared and I knew all the things I wanted, but I was not prepared. And there was just so much more preparation that has to take place than just reading the right books and knowing the right things. There's mental preparation, there's physical preparation, there's conversations you have to have with your provider, just so many other things that I was just not really prepared for. Even talking to my birth team that like came with me to the hospital, and then the fact that kind of the nurses have their own biases and their own plan and schedules and everything. So, and then each nurse is different, and then they have schedule. It's just so much more preparation than I was expecting.
Mhm.
And so my water broke before I even went to the hospital. I was not feeling contractions at this point, so I didn't even know if my water had broken. I actually thought I had like peed the bed. And
Mhm.
so I, went, I didn't take a shower. I didn't like just, eat breakfast. I was so excited. I was like, "Oh, this is it. Like this is time." And so I went to the hospital, and of course, I was immediately put on Pitocin, because if I didn't get my baby out within 24 hours, it was going to be detrimental to her life. And so I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, let's do Pitocin. I know, like this is an emergency." And so, um, and then I made it 14 hours laying in bed with Pitocin. I, tried, the birthing ball because I was like, people talk about this helps. And by that point, there was there was no help. The contractions were just so intense. And Pitocin contractions are way different than like natural contractions. And I know from experience.
Mhm.
But I made it 14 hours laying in bed, barely getting up, and was not encouraged to move around or anything. And I got really in my head. And so I had a cervical check at some point, and I don't remember. And my cervix was supposedly too far back. And I had never had a cervical check before. It was my first one. And so I didn't know, like, first of all, how painful it was going to be in the first place. And then the nurse, without warning, yanked my cervix from the back to the front, supposedly.
What?
And I screamed. And even like the scream was like hearing my own scream, like because I had no control over it. It just came out, like scared me. And it felt like so like that was just taken from me, like. And then all she did was pat my leg and said, I know, I'm sorry, I had to do
Wow.
it." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." No warning or nothing. Like, I understand if you have to do it at this point, but like no warning. And then um so and fast forward, I am like, I need to see like what progress am I making.
Mhm.
And they checked and I was only at a 5, and they said, "You still have a long way to go." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I'm already like crying, I'm getting stressed. So then I'm thinking about like, if I get too stressed out, then what if I end up with a C-section? So I'd rather have an epidural than a C-section.
Mhm.
So I ended up with an epidural. Another thing I was fighting so hard against, like it was not even a question. I did not want it. And here I am feeling like, okay, well, it's either an epidural or an emergency. And so I ended up with an epidural. I like was able to like fall asleep, and I took a nap, woke up, and I felt the baby. And I was like, I know I'm pushing. I don't know how because I can't really feel anything.
Yeah.
but she's in between my legs, and I know she is. So I pushed for about 20 minutes before the OB looked at the nurse and said, if she doesn't get the baby out with the next push, I'm going to cut. And
Wow.
again, I don't even know what she meant by that, if she was threatening C-section or episiotomy, but I was like, "Oh, no, you're not." And I don't know if it came out of my mouth or if it was just in my head, but I distinctly remember thinking, "Oh, no, you will not." And I pushed her out with the next push
Wow.
because there was no way she was going to cut me.
Mhm.
Um, and so I, again, like I had her very quick. I didn't push for too long. She was healthy. We breastfed fine. Healing was okay. I mean, it was just really hard, but um, it was, again, not like one of our lives were in danger or something. It was just, I felt like all of my power over my own body was taken from me multiple times. And I was like, I am not having my baby in the hospital again. Like,
Mhm.
it is not happening. And I understand not everyone can say that, but I was like, for me, I will not have another baby in the hospital if I can help it.
Right.
And so that's when I started researching everything I could about home birth and even just making it not an option to have a hospital birth. It just became like, okay, what all can I learn? Not a pros and cons. It was just like, what can I learn to prepare for this? So I had so much of like my own power back from the beginning because I was making decisions about who was my provider, like who is going to be my birth team, who's going to be in the room with me. And those are decisions you don't get from an OB environment because you don't get to know them. I even remember I wanted to interview a midwife that worked at um, OB office in the town we were in at that time. And they said, we don't do interviews. And I was like, but why not? Like, what if I, what if we don't vibe well? Like,
Mhm.
and they were like, no, you just come in if you want to, and then you just find someone else if you. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. So that like really killed like any kind of like that kind of midwifery.
Mhm.
So I started interviewing midwives, and even that was gave me so much peace knowing like I have control over this and
Yeah.
I get to have a relationship with this person, and they see me for more than 5 minutes at a time, and it's not all about like procedure and like, okay, you're fine, your pee's fine, like you're good, like see you later.
Yeah.
And then the interviewing of a doula and picking who was going to be like my birth best friend and join my family in this amazing experience that I wanted to be an experience and not just you know 10 minutes of someone's day at a hospital.
Right.
So there was just so much freedom even then. And I was able to prepare for things that could happen, and I was hoping they wouldn't, but
Mhm.
I knew that I was starting off from a place where I'm going to feel like supported and loved and cared for by the people that are going to be with me during this time. And so I was also able to understand that like birth is not an emergency unless it is.
Mhm.
And so like I can have a baby at home and it's fine. If something happens, the hospital is there, and like it is there if I need it. And it's not like anything else that happens. Like you don't plan to get hurt in any other way.
Mhm.
And if you do, the hospital's there. You
Yes.
don't plan to have a life-threatening illness, but the hospital's there if you need it.
Yeah.
So just wrapping my mind around that, I was like, like home birth is going to be the best for me so that I can, really avoid all interventions unless it comes to a true emergency where I need it.
Right.
So um, that's how I just came to like having a home birth, and why that is why I needed that with my son.
I love that. And so l- let's fast forward to labor. Like, how did that start and how was that process for you?
Um, so I woke up one morning and I my labor didn't naturally start with my daughter, so I still kind of had no idea. I mean, it was like I was having my first kid. And so I was like, I think that I'm having contractions. And it was like, okay, if I start having contractions, I'm just to go back to sleep. And I could not go back to sleep. And I honestly don't know if it was because of the contractions or because I was excited, but I could not go back to sleep.
Hmm.
And I could tell that it was a rhythm. And so I was like, okay, this is it. Um, I had Braxton Hicks in the like earlier, but I could tell that this was like, okay, these have like timing to them. I can like track these, so this is happening. And so I, let everyone know, and we went through the day just trying to like we cleaned the house. Like my sisters came over, my mom came over, my doula came and visited with me a little bit just to like take me on a walk and let's talk and drink some labor tea. And I think she gave me some kind of date bread or something, some kind of snack. I think it was date bread. I know it was so good, and I like looked for it after I had my son, and I was like, "Where is that bread? I want some more." But I think I had eaten it all and just not even realized it.
Hmm.
But it, never picked up. It never really progressed very far. But then that night, I went to take a shower, and every time I lifted my hands, I would start having a super like strong contraction, and I was like, "Whew, okay, stuff's happening." And so my shower that I was just supposed to be getting cleaned up ended up being like 2 hours long. I was
Wow.
supposed to be watching movies with my sisters and my best friend, and it didn't happen because I was in the shower. And so I finally, got out of the shower, made it to the couch. We settled in for another movie night, just kind of being on baby watch. And at some point, I like lost my glasses, and that's how I knew it was like really serious because my glasses were off, and I didn't really care about my phone anymore. And I was
Hmm.
just, telling my best friend, like, okay, I need you to track contractions because I can't anymore. Like, I am going to try to sleep. And this is when it started where I would actually like sleep through contraction or sleep in between contractions and
Hmm.
then wake up, have one, go back to sleep. And so my doula showed up in the middle of the night. The times were like a blur at this point. I had to ask other people, like, okay, what time did this happen? What time did that happen?
Yeah.
Just so that I could put it down on paper, just because I like those kind of details.
No, I
And
love that.
I love details for myself. I know not everyone does, but so I wrote down times, but um, I woke up well, I was having contractions through the night, and my doula came and sat with me so that I could kind of rest and relax because I kind of started getting in that, like, what if I don't call my midwife in time? She lives an hour away. Like, what if she doesn't
Oh,
make it? Like, all
right.
those things were going through, and she really, like, calmed me down and was like, you rest, and I will try to help you decide when it comes time for that. And it got to a point where they were coming so frequently that she did start like contacting my midwife for me, and so that I wasn't having to like think about it, and I was able to really focus on labor, which I think that is the most amazing part about having a doula, is that a mom can just not have to think logically and can just focus on labor. And even as someone who like I've already like learned all the things, and I already know all the things. I know the positions I can try. I like know all the stuff. Having someone there that's like, you don't think, you focus on your baby. You focus on like your body, and I will focus on like logically, like, okay, maybe you should try this position or whatever, or maybe we need to walk a little bit and help things progress or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was I was able to kind of just breathe and have peace in that. And so again, things are kind of like a blur because you get in labor land and you're just like not thinking about anything. And we came to, I started getting in my head and I'm like, I can't do this. I'm exhausted. How am I going to push? I haven't really slept since the morning before. And I was like, I can't do this. My midwife is there and um, she said she was gonna to check and see where I was at, and if I like wasn't a 6, then she was gonna go ahead and leave and then come back. Well, I was a 5, and I knew I did not want cervical checks because I didn't want to be discouraged, and I
Hmm.
I still like ended up with one, and even though I was like I really don't want this, and I caved, which again next time I know like you learn something new every time.
Oh, yeah.
And so next time I'm gonna be like, nope, not happening at all. Because she said 5, and immediately I was like, oh my gosh, like really? I thought I was like almost done, and she didn't leave though. So I had that in my head. I'm like, well, why didn't she leave? Because she said if I wasn't a 6 yet, she was leaving. But
Hmm.
she was still there. So that still was like in my mind, like maybe something is happening that I don't know. And um I went to the bathroom and to hide from everyone just because I was like, they're making me work and I'm tired and I want to rest. So I went on the toilet. I was like, listen, I need some time, some me time. And I came out and my doula was like, hey, if you want to have the baby, like you got to start moving, okay? Like I know you're tired, but we're going to get this baby out and you can do this. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I got so mad at her and I started crying and I still apologize to her to this day. But I was so mad and I was like, no, I want to sleep, which I couldn't have slept anyway. The contractions would not have let me because it was so close. Um, and my doula knew that, my midwife knew that, but I was like so in my head. I was like, I cannot like be close. And she encouraged me and my husband to slow dance, and we walked up and down the hall, and I ended up like leaning over my ball and I was just crying and crying and I was like, I can't do this. I'm so tired. And my husband came and talked to me and he was like, you can do this. I love you. And words of affirmation is my love language. And I was
Hmm.
like, yes, give it to me. Like,
I
keep
love it.
talking. I love it.
Yes.
And I I also did like Christian hypnobirthing, um, and like listened to that throughout my pregnancy and like was listening to it during labor. And I really feel like when I just was like, okay, I can do this. This is what I prepared for. Start getting out of my head and like going back to this, like I've prepared for this. I have control of this. It really like released me to just trust my body, trust how God made me. And I remember like really kind of like releasing the tension in my stomach. I know like that's like a really random thing because a contraction is tension in your stomach. And I just remember relaxing and even just in my stomach, just relaxing. And I had the strongest contraction where I like out loud made a sound. And everyone was like, yes, like we need 10 more of those. And I said, no, we do not. I said, no, we don't. And again, I went to the bathroom and I came out and I immediately went on to all fours. And it was like a switch was flipped that I had no control over what was happening anymore. I was pushing. I like this was happening. The baby was coming, and I had people like shuffling behind me, and I didn't know why. And my midwife was like, "Did you just pee your pants?" And I was like, "No, I don't think so." And she said, "Okay, I think your water just broke." And so she ended up like encouraging me to move to the bed, which again, with the next baby, I will definitely have my baby wherever I end up.
Mm-hmm.
But I did end up like on the bed and like leaning over onto my doula, like leaning back on her, and like she was just comforting me and like rubbing my forehead, which I loved. It was like such a great moment. And I remember telling her and my husband, I was like, I cannot do this. Like, I was just at 5. Like, what about cervical lip? What if I rip my cervix? Like, what if like I'm not ready to push? And they're like, if your body is pushing, it's time to push. Like, it's okay. Listen to your body. And I didn't really have any control. Like I did, but like it was my body's control. Like it wasn't my head. My head didn't have to do anything. It knew what it was. My body knew what it was doing. So um I pushed, and I, felt myself, which was I was so excited for, like, to feel my own baby kind of in between, like in my stomach and in the world. And so I felt for his head, which I didn't know it was a him at this point. We were surprised about the gender. And so I like felt, and I I felt my waters, and I was like, "Oh, my waters are still there." And they're like, "Well, if you want to, you can push on them." And I did. And so that was another thing that was like so cool to like, cuz we knew my water had already broken. So he wasn't going to be like born in the sack. So I was like, "Okay." And so I pushed on it, and I felt that release of like the rest of the waters breaking, and that I again had control over that, and I did it myself, and it was such an amazing experience. And I really wanted to catch him, but I like tense up my hands when I get like in pain. And so my husband actually had to like force my hand down to like grab my baby. And so I, pulled him up on me, and I was just like so happy. I was like, oh my gosh, I did it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I had my baby at home. Like, it's done. Like, this is what I've prepared for and I've wanted and desired. And, we had the amazing moment of like, well, what is it? Like, what's the baby? And I got to look and say, it's a boy. And, you know, everyone's crying. And it was just such an amazing experience. And, um, it was totally redeeming, like from like my previous experience of like feeling like so much had been taken from me, and then having this experience where I had control over so much stuff, and I had my baby and I delivered my baby. And so having that power, and I just felt it all in that moment of like relief of like I did it. And so the next like few minutes were like I was totally focused on him. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to breastfeed. Like my daughter's there, and she watched the whole thing happen.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
yeah, it was perfect. And that was a whole other like preparation I had to do, was like making sure that she was like prepared for that. She was 4, she had just turned 4. And so just preparing her was a whole other process. But I also, allowed her to like, if she didn't want to be there, if she got scared, like she can leave at any time. Like I don't want her to be traumatized by this. Um, but if she wants to be there, like I want her to have this experience, and I want her to like know like that birth is beautiful, and even setting that groundwork for her now, like as a little girl, that one day you're going to have this experience and it can be like beautiful and not scary. So,
I love that.
yeah, so we were just like laying in bed and enjoying being a family of 4, and it was such a dreamy experience to just be there together. Like I still like in my memories, it was like so, I mean, you're on a birth high already, but just laying there on my own bed with my husband and my daughter and like our new baby, and just like the view of like all these people that I love like there with me. So it was totally, absolutely what I wanted it to be. And I mean, you can't plan every little thing, but if I could say like the perfect like labor and delivery, like that would be it for me.
It sounds
So
dreamy. I mean,
it was so
like,
dreamy.
I love it. And then, so after, you guys were in this high and all just like getting to know each other, meeting this new little being in person. And so how was that? Like, how was it after? Did it last a while? Did you guys just lay in bed for a while or?
um, so timing gets really, really difficult, even more than it was before. Because I wanted to my placenta to deliver naturally. I didn't want any rush on like clamping or cutting the cord. And my midwife knew that. So I was really like put off when she was like, "Okay, it's time to cut the cord, Dad. Come on." And I was like, "What? Well, I don't want to yet. Like my placenta hasn't delivered yet. Like I want to like deliver the placenta naturally, like And she was like, "Well, we kind of can't do that because you're bleeding a little bit." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so she started like trying to control that. And it's kind of when I started like going out of it a little bit, and like I kind of felt like really off and kind of dizzy. But still I was like with my baby, with my daughter, like we're good. Like my kids are my whole world, so I'm like I'm good. And I was like whatever she has to do, like he's here. I've had everything that I wanted. Like she can do it. I trust her. I This is why I hired her. So I trust whatever like she needs to do. And so which this is totally off like track kind of, but another different like huge difference between like the OB experience and a midwife experience was I still have like my midwife giving me all these affirmations like of like you did amazing. I can't believe you just did that. You had this baby and you have a huge baby. And because he ended up being 10 pounds 2 ounces.
Oh, wow.
And she was like, you didn't tear at all, like you look amazing, like just all these affirmations. And like with my daughter, I didn't get any of that. And so like again, it's my love language, so maybe that may not matter to other people, but to know that the midwife I chose like wanted me to succeed and wanted me to have the birth that I wanted was like it was amazing, another amazing aspect of this. And so she I found out that she like got the bleeding under control at that time. And um we like laid in bed for a little bit longer. Like he was nursing, and me and him were gonna get in the pool because I was gonna have him in the pool. And when I got on the bed, she told the assistant, she was like, she's not having this baby in the pool. Like the baby's coming now. Like there's no point in even finishing filling up the pool because that baby's coming. And so instead, we just filled up the pool for like a sitz bath afterwards.
Oh, perfect.
And so we went to get in it, and again, it was kind of like hazy. I was like, what is going on? Why am I like not able to really focus my mind? And they were holding, his name's Joshua. So they were holding Joshua and kind of walking around the room with him. My midwife like bathed him in front of me, like in between my legs. And I had all these thoughts in my head and I could not get them to come out of my mouth. So I was like, why can't I hold my baby? Why am I not bathing my baby? Like, and then she got him out, they dried him off and gave him to my husband. I'm like, why did I not get him? Like, and then they started asking questions about like, hey, what would you like us to put like on him? Like what do you want his first outfit to be? And again, in my head, I was like, why are they asking me this? I don't want him dressed. Like, I don't want a diaper on him, but they were trying to get me to kind of like snap out of it because I
Mhm.
was starting to get like really, not there. And I was like, I don't feel good. And they're like, okay, well, let's try to get you out. And I stood up and I went to get out and I ended up on the floor and I ended up, you know, like having a hemorrhage that was pretty intense. They were having a hard time getting it under control and they did have to call like 911 and have an ambulance come. However, my midwife had gotten the bleeding under control like before then. She did have to manually stop the bleeding, which, you know, it's not comfortable. It was
Mhm.
pretty intense. And um I I could remember a lot of the pain and a lot of the like how scary it was, but you know, even like my husband and my best friend were there like, come on, you gotta think about your kids, like stay with us, come on. And I was like, what, I'm dying? Like
Oh, shoot.
I don't feel like I'm dying. So then I'm in my head like, oh my gosh, I'm dying and I don't even know that this is happening. And which it really, like, I was fine, and my midwife knew that and she had it under control. But again, in my head, I did not know what was going on and I couldn't like rationalize like what was going on. um However, I had planned for something like this to happen, and that was like part of my birth plan. I had thought about it, I prepared for it. I didn't think it was actually going to happen, but it did. And so even when um, someone asked, like, is the baby going on the ambulance and or going to the hospital with you? And um, they like looked at me and I was like, I don't know. And I looked at my midwife and she said, I would not do that. If you are comfortable leaving him at home, I would leave him at home because he was fine. There's nothing wrong with him at all. And so there was really no reason for him to go. And I was totally okay with that. I actually had been collecting colostrum for weeks before. And so they had colostrum to like feed to him while I was at the
Perfect.
hospital. It was already
Mhm.
in syringes. Like
Oh,
I'd done
good.
all the work. And so I was like, that's fine. Like, I'm okay with that. He's going to be with his big sister. He knows her voice. Like, he's
Mhm.
heard it his whole life in my belly. He's going to be with my mom, with my doula, with my birth photographer, who is also a doula.
Mhm.
And again, you have like this close relationship with these people. You know them very like intimately. So I was like, I trust him to be here. I'm going to go. They're going to check me out and then I'm coming back home. Like, and so, my midwife got the bleeding stopped. I did end up going to the hospital. They checked everything out. There was no like damage physically. The bleeding had stopped at this point. I um, didn't have to have a transfusion. I was 1 point off from a transfusion, and I was like, nope, I'm going home. Like,
Wow.
they were like,
Mhm.
we can keep you overnight. And I was like, no, I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go be with my baby. Like, I'll be okay.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I ended up going home and I was kind of on watch by my family and friends for a few months. They were, worried about, when it hit me. But even now, I can talk about it and it is not like trauma to me. Like, it was really insane. And I should have been, really, triggered by it. But I think that because I had such an empowering like birth experience, that what happened afterwards, like I said, we used the hospital for what it was needed for. Like
Mhm.
I had my baby at home. He was fine. He was healthy. Something happened and I ended up going to the hospital. But even in that, like they didn't really even have to do anything. They just made sure I was okay. And if I had needed something, they were there.
Right.
And so again, it was so like redemptive because of the past experience I had. And then this one where like I trusted my body, I trusted God, and I trusted my family. I relied on my husband. I was able to lean on him. It was just so, so amazing. And so I think that that really came into like where I was mentally okay.
Hmm.
And I talked about it, I processed it with multiple people, and we worked on it, but I could hear like whispers of like, you really need to make sure she's okay. Like you really need to watch her and make sure that this doesn't like hit her really hard.
Hmm.
And I would be lying if I said it didn't like affect me bonding with my son. There was like I was so sad that I like missed my daughter holding him for the first time. The first time he opened his eyes. Um like the first sleepy smile that he had. Like I missed those things. And so that was really hard. But, it was kind of like I grieved it and I sat with it and I was okay. I was like okay with it because
Hmm.
again, I had prepared for it and I had done the work that I needed to do to be ready for something like that. And so, like, knowing I was ready in case something like this happened, but I still had the birth that I wanted, like, that
Right.
was what mattered to me.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. And I think that it's super important that you did that work beforehand because you planned for all these different situations. And I think we all should like plan for the worst case scenario. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. But at least if it does, you have that plan in place and you're not at the last second trying to scramble and think of a logical reason or the best way that you would want to do that. So, oh my gosh, kudos to you for doing all that work. Like, that was so amazing. And like throughout this whole process, how did your husband support you? Like, I'm sure that was a little scary for him to see too.
He did amazingly, which he was the only one that people were like, "Okay, he's probably never gonna let you have kids again." Like, but he is the most supportive person in my life, and, um, even when he, like I mean, he does disagree. We do disagree on things, but even still, he trusts me and he like knows that the decisions that I'm making are like that there's a reason and it's not for nothing. So he is very supportive of me, and I think also we were able to process it together, and I was able to kind of like talk to him and be like, okay, so how are you doing? And just making sure that he was in an okay place. And um, I think that it did like again, it came in between him and our son bonding a
Mhm.
little bit. Just full transparency. It was really like it was difficult on a relational level um, for both of us. And I think that like once it we like were able to process it and kind of get through it, then that really it helps so much because we are a very close family. We do everything together, and his relationship with our son now is even closer than he was with our daughter
Mhm.
when she was his age. So like once we like worked through it, it was like so much better. um, but he did respond really well, which he could have, things could have been like a lot worse, like for him mentally, to
Mhm.
watch that happen. But again, I think that the support we had all around is really what helped both of us to get through it.
Yeah, and I think that's great that you also, talk to him and were like transparent about his feelings because I feel like a lot of times we forget about the dad and the focus is on us as the pregnant woman.
Hmm.
And but it's like there's this other person who helped us create this life. Like their role is so important. Sometimes like the most important role,
Yeah.
next to us. So I think that's beautiful. So is there anything that you feel like the best piece of advice you would give someone like planning a home birth?
Yes. I wholeheartedly support making a birth plan. And like don't think that it's not insignificant and that, like, oh, I don't have to plan for that. Like, just because you plan for something does not mean it's going to happen. But when it does happen, like, you will have hoped you or like wish you had planned for it. So
Hmm.
go ahead and make that birth plan. It doesn't mean that anything bad's going to happen. And it doesn't mean you're going to be like totally disappointed and crushed if it doesn't go that way, like the way that you wanted. But just having these goals, what it'll be like so instrumental to like how everything goes. Because when, I mean, you don't even know what could happen specifically to you. Like, I did not, hemorrhaging is not really what I thought was going to happen to me. I thought, if anything, it was going to be like, failure to progress or something. Like, that was kind of on the lower of the list that I would think would happen to me. But it did happen. But I had prepared for it and I had planned for it. And when it did happen, I would not have been able to think about like the decisions that I needed to make. I was luckily able to say like, no, I want my son to stay here, which is something I thought in the case of a hospital transfer, we both would have gone, or like I would still be like pregnant or something like that. And so I was not even like really thinking about the fact that one of us could go and the other one could stay home, but I felt safest with him at home. Like, I was way more comfortable with that than if he had gone to the hospital with me.
Hmm.
And so, and I know not everyone probably feels that way. I'm sure that there are some people who would absolutely take the baby with them, and that's their experience. But for me, I was way more comfortable with having him at home with people that I trusted, and um, because things can always happen. And just like limiting the ways that something could happen is very important. But
Yes.
again, I couldn't have made that decision like otherwise, because I have huge chunks of my memory that are just gone. Like, I was awake. I was kind of conscious. My eyes were open. I was talking, and I have no idea like what I said, what other people said to me. I met nurses in the hospital that like they'd come in the room like a second and third time, and I was like, "Who's that?" And they were like, "That's the nurse you were just talking to." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I think that one of the nurses even brought me like cookies at some point, or like crackers or something, and I did not even remember asking for them, but I had specifically asked for them. And
Wow.
so I was not in the place to make a decision like that. So knowing that I'd already made like all the decisions in the first place, I think that also is what helped me have peace with what happened.
Wow. Yes,
Um,
definitely.
I think that like being educated is super powerful. And even if you fully trust your midwife, you fully trust your OB, nurses, medicine, whatever, wherever you are in your walk, I think it is very important to still be educated and to know like what you want and make decisions for yourself. Of course, there will be things that happen and you won't be able to, someone else will have to make the decision. But I think that we should not hand over our power to anybody. We should trust our instincts and trust our own body, and we shouldn't have to just like give everything to someone else to be like, okay, whatever you want, that's what we're going to do. Because these people are not, like I said before, they're not going to live with your birth experience. Like, you're going
Hmm.
to live with it for the rest of your life. They're going to leave and go to someone else's birth. Or, my midwife like was at a football or baseball game or something right before like my birth. So that's what she was thinking about, I'm sure, like after she left me. Which, again, I love my midwife, but she has her own life. Like, my birth was only a very small portion of her life and all the other moms that she serves. So the decisions that I make and that I like allow to happen aren't really on her as much as they are on me and the rest of my life and the rest of my kids' life. And so they don't really have to live with it as much as I do. So, um,
Exactly.
And you still have to put in work, even if you're having a home birth. There's still preparation and planning and education you have to do. So I would definitely still just put in the work and
Hmm.
prepare as much as you can. Prepare for everything. Parenting begins as soon as you get pregnant, and
Oh, yeah,
so
definitely. And is there anything that you would suggest for like preparing a partner for like a home birth?
definitely know their love language
Hmm.
because you know, oxytocin is the most important hormone in in labor and delivery and like multiple other things, but like specifically like they can progress so much faster if they feel loved and supported. So
Hmm.
knowing their love language, knowing how to support them like the best way, like that's important. And even if your love language is something totally different, like you still need to know what their love language is and kind of put yours aside and serve them
Hmm.
because they are not like focused on loving you at that moment. Like you need to be focused on loving them. And like I said, my husband, like I was in my head and crying and just him, you know, using my love language and giving me words of affirmation that I think that that played a huge role in like the progression of how fast my labor went after that because well first of all crying is super beneficial to labor but then just feeling that love and like okay he believes in me and he loves me and I'm not doing this alone and you know labor doesn't have to be just the mom like the dad can
Hmm.
have an active part in that and so just loving her the way she needs to be loved and to feel love and then make sure you know what their birth plan is because you know if you're like oh well she's making the plan and just leave it all to her then when you have questions like labor and delivery and when you're transferring to a hospital those are not the times to be having those discussions
No.
you need to have them beforehand the last thing that y'all need to do is disagree when it comes down to it um,
Yeah,
or if you are going to disagree, it needs to have started like when y'all are pregnant and preparing for a home birth.
exactly.
Um, and then know what their expectations are, and then voice your own expectations of like how active you want to be and like everything and like your role and because if you're expecting to be super involved and they don't want you to touch them at all, then you need to know that. And then if you don't expect to be involved at all and then they want you to be like right there the whole time, like I mean those types of things can really have an effect on labor and how it progresses and everything. So, and the
Yeah.
mentality, the mental part of it, and then how y'all process it afterwards too. So,
Oh, yeah. I think that's really important too. Talk about it
yeah.
afterwards. We do all the
Yes.
preparation before, but there also has to be some type for postpartum.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
if there was anything you would like have a redo on, like, is there anything in preparing or during your birth experience that, like, if you had a redo, you would do differently?
I'm gonna say no. I would not redo it because I think everything like went the way it needed to go. And you know, like I said, I am okay with the experience. Like I can sit with it and like I said, I also had a dreamy like birth and labor and I loved it. And yes, everything afterwards was not the greatest, but I'm like okay with it and I'm able to sit with it and like it's closed. Like that it happened. Will I do things differently the next time? Absolutely. There will be things that I will change. Like I already mentioned, I will not be doing cervical checks like during the whole thing because mentally I can't do it. I think it gets me in my head, which it's a whole other, you know, thing of like research on cervical checks and how effective they are and everything. But mentally, I just it just got me in my head and um I will not be doing them the next time.
Mhm.
Um, and I will like follow my body's lead. I had a lot of other like physical things happen after in the following weeks. And so I was in bed for a lot of the time in the following weeks, and I wanted to have like the beautiful fourth trimester like experience. I didn't think I was gonna have to be forced into it, but um, I ended up like I had mastitis twice.
Mhm.
My tailbone was fractured, and I really think it had something to do with like how I delivered, because a lot of the pain that I was experiencing while pushing him out was in my butt, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, my butt hurts so bad." And um, so ideally, I would just follow my body and let it decide what position I pushed in,
Mhm.
instead of like allowing other voices to tell me like where I needed to be. Um, because I really didn't care if my baby was born on the ground. Like the floor was clean. We were ready for it. If I got blood on the floor, I didn't care. We could replace the carpet. Like
Yeah.
I really did not mind it. And so um it was just like once you're in that place, it's just like unless you're able to completely tune it out and focus, then you're really easily like moved in that at that stage of labor.
Oh yeah.
Um so yeah, just making sure that everyone knew like do not move me. If I'm somewhere and I'm pushing, let me push there.
Yes.
Um I and this is silly, but my midwife had the pool, and she was going to bring it whenever she came, and so we didn't have it early on in labor, and I wish I had had it sooner. So the next one I will be renting a pool.
I don't think
And
that's
like
silly at all.
I was like, this is kind of insignificant because I don't know if I would have ended up in it anyway, but I think I would have because I took like 2 or 3 baths, and it would have been way better if I had been like in the pool,
Right.
and like had the whole submersion instead of like in this tiny bathtub. But
Mm.
yeah, so I'll definitely be renting my own pool instead of just, yeah, I'll just use the midwives, save some
Right.
money, but
Yep. No, that's great. I've so enjoyed listening to your story and this whole conversation. Like your birth story, like gives me all the feels. Like I really felt like I was in your story. So that was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I
Of
really appreciate it. I'm
course.
like honored.
Oh gosh, are you kidding? I am honored that you took the time out of your busy day to come and chat with me.
Oh, I love
Um,
it.
Yeah, so if anybody would like to like get a hold of you, come into contact with you, what would be the best way to do that?
So I have Instagram, Noble and Grace Hollow, and I have a website, nobleandgracehollow.com, and I'm also on Facebook. And really, I could be contacted any way, and I will get it. My phone is kind of like my job, so I have it all the time. I can be contacted any of those ways. And then I also have email, so really
Okay,
any way that works for anyone else.
awesome. And of course, I will link all of that in the show notes for everybody to easily access you.
Awesome.
All
Awesome.
right, well, thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, bye.
Bye.
Oh my gosh, I feel so honored that you took the time out of your busy day to listen to that episode. I really hope that you liked it or something resonated with you or you learned something new today. Make sure to hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to connect with me, go ahead and go to the show notes and click the link to connect with me. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a beautiful day. I will see you next week.